I supported my sister-in-law through her divorce for months, always listening to her problems and trying to be there for her. But everything took a horrible turn. She made a pass at me, and when I rejected her, she turned the tables and accused me of something awful during a family dinner. And the worst part? My wife believed her. She left me. I still don't know how it all unraveled so fast. I keep replaying everything in my head, trying to understand how a situation that began with me simply trying to help ended with my marriage falling apart. I need to tell you what happened, because I'm still struggling to process how my own wife could turn against me when all I did was try to help her sister during one of the hardest times in her life. My wife, Dana, has a younger sister named Jessica. She's always been a little dramatic, but I never really minded because she mostly kept to herself. We'd only see her during family gatherings, where she'd usually drink too much wine and rant about whatever guy she was dating at the time. About 4 years ago, Jessica married a guy named Mark. Seemed like a decent man, had a steady job at some insurance company and treated her well, at least from what I could see. But Jessica always found something to criticize. Dana would just roll her eyes and say, "That's just Jessica being Jessica." Jessica constantly complained. Mark worked too much, didn't take her to fancy restaurants, spent too much time watching sports on weekends. Dana would listen patiently but later tell me privately that Jessica had unrealistic ideas about marriage. I stayed out of it. I figured it was sister stuff and didn't concern me. But over time, I could tell Dana was getting drained from always being Jessica's emotional sponge. Then about 8 months ago, Jessica called Dana around 11 p.m. sobbing. Mark had asked for a divorce and she was completely blindsided. Even though Dana and I both knew things hadn't been great between them, Jessica had been posting passive-aggressive things on Facebook for months. Cryptic messages about being underappreciated, and how some people don't know what they have until it's gone. It was obvious she was referring to Mark, and Dana often felt embarrassed that the whole family could see it. That night, Jessica was hysterical on the phone. She said she had nowhere to go. Mark wanted to keep the house, and she couldn't afford to live on her own. She only worked part-time, and her income barely covered anything. She'd always been reckless with money and was used to Mark footing most of the bills. Now the thought of fending for herself terrified her. She kept crying, saying she was going to end up homeless and living in her car. Dana didn't hesitate. She offered to let Jessica stay with us for a few weeks while she figured things out. I agreed. I thought Jessica just needed a little family support during a tough time. I assumed it would be temporary anyway. Dana is very close to her family, and I knew it meant a lot to her to be able to help her sister. I told Dana Jessica could use the guest room for as long as she needed to get back on her feet. At the time, I hoped a break from Mark would help Jessica gain some perspective. Maybe they'd even work things out. But Dana told me the divorce was already in motion. Mark had talked to a lawyer. This wasn't going to be patched up. Jessica moved in that weekend with just a couple of suitcases and a lot of tears. She claimed Mark had changed the locks and wouldn't let her retrieve the rest of her belongings. It seemed extreme, but I didn't want to get dragged into their mess. I helped her carry her bags upstairs and told her to make herself at home. Dana took the whole week off work to help her sister, finding a lawyer, checking out apartments, comforting her through constant emotional meltdowns. Meanwhile, Jessica spent her days on the couch, crying into boxes of tissues and watching daytime TV. I kept working my regular schedule. Someone had to keep the money coming in, and honestly, Dana's always been better at handling the emotional side of things. Jessica also seemed to prefer confiding in her sister when it came to the nitty-gritty of her marriage problems. For the first few weeks it wasn't too bad. Dana managed the emotional support, and I would just nod along politely when Jessica vented during dinner. But soon Dana had to return to work. She had used most of her vacation days, and her boss wasn't thrilled with how much time she'd already taken off. Dana's always been dedicated to her job, and she couldn't afford to jeopardize it. Since I work from home, I was usually around. That's when Jessica started turning to me instead of Dana whenever she was upset. She'd knock on my office door during the day, asking if I had a few minutes because she was having a panic attack, or she just heard from her lawyer with bad news. And I couldn't just ignore her. She was clearly struggling, and talking seemed to calm her down. So I'd step away from my work for a bit, sit with her in the living room while she poured out her latest crisis. Whether it was Mark's lawyer saying she wasn't entitled to half their savings, or Mark refusing to let her retrieve personal items from their house, I listened. Jessica would always thank me afterward, saying I was the only one who really understood her. I chalked it up to gratitude, just appreciation for someone being there during a rough period. But over the next several weeks it became a pattern. Jessica would wait until Dana left for work, then come straight to me. At first I didn't think much of it. Maybe she just didn't want to interrupt Dana during office hours. But gradually she started treating the house more like her own. She got comfortable. She started cooking dinner for all of us, cleaning the house, doing laundry. Honestly, it helped. Dana and I both work full-time, and there are days we're too exhausted to keep up with chores. Jessica always made sure dinner was ready when Dana got home. She'd ask me what I liked to eat, what groceries to buy, always trying to be helpful. It seemed like she was trying to show that she could contribute. But then came the late nights. Jessica started staying up to wait for me if I went out with friends or ran errands in the evening. I'd walk in and find her sitting in the living room in her pajamas, ready to talk about how lonely she felt, how she couldn't sleep because of everything going on. I'd usually suggest she try resting, but she'd keep talking, following me from room to room, even when it was obvious I wanted to call it a night. She'd follow me into the kitchen if I went for a glass of water, or knock on the bathroom door while I was getting ready for bed, continuing her monologue through the door. She'd go on about how much it meant to her that I was there to talk to, how much better she felt after our conversations. It reached a point where I felt she was becoming too dependent on me emotionally. I started thinking that maybe she needed professional help, therapy, a support group, something that didn't involve leaning entirely on me. Then one night, 2 months after she had moved in, I came home from having drinks with coworkers. Jessica was waiting for me in the kitchen, wearing this silky nightgown that was far too revealing for someone staying in her sister's house. She had opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses. The moment I walked in, she handed me one and started talking again. This time about how grateful she was for everything I'd done, how I was a better man than Mark or any of the others she had been with. I took the glass of wine because I didn't want to seem rude, but I kept the conversation focused on practical things, like how her apartment search was going and whether she'd heard back from any of the jobs she'd applied to. Jessica had been browsing listings for weeks, but every time it came down to applying, she had a new excuse. The rent was too high. The neighborhood wasn't safe. The place was too small. I started wondering if she was truly interested in moving out, or if she was just growing too comfortable living with us. She kept steering the conversation into more personal territory, and it became increasingly uncomfortable. Every time I said something even mildly amusing, she would touch my arm when she laughed. It didn't feel like casual friendliness, it felt flirtatious. She'd lean in a little too close when speaking, brush against me unnecessarily when reaching for something, and compliment me constantly, telling me how understanding I was, how much she enjoyed our conversations. At first, I chalked it up to misplaced gratitude, but that night it went further than I ever imagined it would. After about 20 minutes of this strange energy, I told Jessica I was tired and needed to get some sleep. I started walking toward the stairs, hoping that would end it, but she grabbed my hand. She said she needed to tell me something important. Her eyes welled up, and with a look that mixed sadness and longing, she told me that spending time with me had opened her eyes to what had been missing in her marriage. She said she had developed feelings for me, feelings that went beyond gratitude. I immediately pulled my hand away. I told her she was just confused. She was going through a divorce, and her emotions were all over the place. She didn't have real feelings for me. She was just desperate for someone to make her feel seen again after everything with Mark. But Jessica insisted that I was wrong. She said she'd been thinking about this for weeks, that it wasn't some impulsive crush. She claimed she could tell I felt the same way, that the time we spent together, my patience, my support, it all meant something more. I made it absolutely clear. I was married to her sister. That line would never be crossed. I told her she needed to stop seeing me that way because it wasn't just inappropriate. It was completely unacceptable. That's when she broke down. She started crying, saying Dana didn't appreciate me the way she did. That Dana worked late all the time, barely paid attention to me, and took me for granted. That made me angry. Jessica had no right to make judgments about my marriage or to insert herself between me and my wife like that. I didn't say another word. I went straight upstairs and into bed, but sleep was impossible. I kept thinking about what had just happened, what it might mean for everything. Should I tell Dana right away? Or wait and see if Jessica would come to her senses, realize what she did was wrong, and act normal again? In the end, I decided to wait. I was hoping that she would be embarrassed, maybe ashamed, and that she'd finally start seriously looking for her own place. But the next morning, right after Dana left for work, Jessica came to my office. She started by apologizing for the things she'd said the night before, but then said she still meant every word. She told me she couldn't help how she felt about me, that she'd thought about it all night, that I did have feelings for her. I was just too loyal to Dana to admit it. She said if I gave her a chance, she could make me happier than Dana ever could. I shut her down again. I told her flat out, she was wrong. I loved my wife. I had never had and never would have any romantic feelings for her. I told her if she couldn't respect my marriage, then she needed to start looking for another place to stay. That's when she turned defensive. She said I was the one who led her on, that I had spent all that time talking to her, comforting her. And how could I blame her for misunderstanding my signals? I told her I had only ever tried to help her as family, that there were no signals. None. I said this whole thing needed to stop before it destroyed something it never should have touched. She cried again, apologized again, and said she'd try to control her feelings. But then she asked if we could still talk when she was upset because, in her words, talking to me was the only thing that helped her feel better about the divorce. I gently told her I thought it would be better for her to speak with Dana, or a therapist, someone trained to help her work through everything. That's when she snapped. She accused me of abandoning her when she needed me most. She said she thought I cared more than that. I told her I did care, as Dana's sister, but what she wanted from me was something I couldn't and wouldn't give her. Then I walked back into my office, closed the door, and tried to focus on work, even though my mind was spinning. For the next few days, Jessica avoided me. She wouldn't talk, and she'd leave the room if I walked in, which honestly was a relief. I hoped that meant she was finally getting over whatever this was. She still acted normal with Dana and helped around the house with cooking and cleaning, but around me? Cold, distant, and deliberately avoiding eye contact. Dana noticed. She asked if something was going on, said Jessica seemed off and was acting weird around me. I came close to telling her everything right then, but I hesitated. I wanted to give it a little more time to see if the situation would calm down, hoping Jessica would realize how wrong her behavior had been and either apologize or quietly move on. Instead, it got worse. Jessica started acting more resentful. At dinner, she'd make passive-aggressive comments, saying things like how some people lead others on, and then act like the victim when things get complicated. Every time I entered a room, she would sigh dramatically like I was ruining her day. And then came the breaking point. The following weekend, we all went to Dana's parents' house to celebrate her father's birthday. Jessica was strange the entire evening. She clung to Dana, complimenting her in an over-the-top way, and kept making these little remarks. How lucky Dana was to have such a supportive husband, or how some men just can't be trusted, no matter how charming they seem. At first, I thought she was just being passive-aggressive again, still bitter from being rejected. But Dana's mom clearly noticed something. She asked Jessica if she was okay. We were at a big family dinner. Dana's parents, her brother Tom and his girlfriend, her aunt and uncle, 10 or 12 people in total. Everyone sitting around the dining table when Jessica decided to detonate her bomb. We had just finished eating. Dana's dad was opening a bottle of wine for his birthday toast when Jessica suddenly started crying. She said there was something she needed to tell the family. Everyone leaned in, expecting maybe news about her divorce, or that she'd found a new job or apartment. But no. Jessica looked directly at me and said that I had been making inappropriate advances toward her while she was staying at our house. She said she'd been trying to handle it quietly, but it had gone too far, and she didn't know what to do anymore. I was stunned, completely blindsided. I couldn't speak for a few seconds. Then I said, truthfully, that she was lying. That she had been the one who made advances toward me. Jessica immediately broke down, crying harder, claiming I was just trying to flip the story. She said she wouldn't have said anything if I hadn't been so persistent, if I hadn't made her feel so uncomfortable. And there I sat at that table with all of Dana's family staring at me like I was some kind of predator. Dana looked heartbroken, devastated, confused, like her entire world had just been shattered, and she didn't know what to believe. Jessica went on to claim that I had been complimenting her appearance, asking her personal questions about her marriage, and touching her in ways that made her uncomfortable. She said she had tried to brush it off at first because she was grateful for having a place to stay, but insisted that it had gotten worse over time, to the point where she felt afraid to be alone in the house with me. Then she said I told her that Dana didn't understand me, that I was attracted to her, and that I had tried to kiss her the night before. It was all a complete fabrication. But as I looked around the room, I could tell. Everyone was hanging on to every word she said. I tried to speak up, to explain what had actually happened. That it was Jessica who had made advances toward me, but she kept interrupting, insisting I was lying. She said she had kept quiet because she was scared and didn't think anyone would believe her. Dana's dad stood up and told me bluntly that I needed to leave. I wasn't welcome in their house anymore. Dana's mom was hugging Jessica, telling her how brave she was for coming forward and how sorry she was that she had to experience something like that. Dana's brother, Tom, looked like he was ready to punch me. He kept repeating, "How could you do something like that?" over and over, as if it were already proven fact. Within minutes, the whole room turned against me. No one wanted to hear what I had to say. Jessica was crying, clearly performing for everyone, and they were buying every second of it. Dana sat there frozen, her eyes darting between the two of us, confusion and devastation written all over her face. I tried to speak to her, to tell her this wasn't true, but she quietly told me not to say another word, that we would talk at home. I couldn't believe it. My own wife didn't immediately defend me, didn't stand by me. It was as if the whole room had decided who I was without even letting me speak. The drive home was completely silent. When we got back, Dana went straight upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and left me to sleep on the couch, stunned and heartbroken. I lay there all night, wide awake, trying to make sense of it all. How could someone be so cruel, so manipulative? Jessica had destroyed my marriage and my relationship with Dana's family simply because I rejected her advances. The next morning, Dana came downstairs and told me she'd been thinking about everything all night. She said that in hindsight she had started to notice things, how much time I'd been spending with Jessica, how uncomfortable Jessica had seemed lately, how she always seemed to be around when I was home alone. Dana said that looking back the signs were there, that maybe something inappropriate had been happening, even if I didn't realize it. I tried again to explain. I reminded her that Jessica had come to me constantly for emotional support, that I was just trying to help her cope with her divorce, not lead her on. But Dana said that maybe I had misunderstood Jessica's vulnerability and crossed the line unintentionally, that maybe, without realizing it, I had taken advantage of her emotional state. That was it, I snapped. I told Dana I knew exactly what had happened, that Jessica had made a move on me, and when I rejected her, she turned it around to protect herself. And maybe deep down she hoped that if she tore our marriage apart, I'd somehow become available to her. Dana said she wanted to believe me, but then she said something that hit me like a punch to the chest. Jessica had seemed genuinely afraid and traumatized. Dana couldn't understand why she would make up something so serious if it weren't true. Jessica had given her specific details, things I supposedly said, moments I supposedly touched her. Dana said her sister's story was consistent and convincing, while mine felt defensive and self-serving. She said maybe I had sent mixed signals without meaning to, that Jessica might have taken my kindness as something more. And when I finally made it clear there was nothing between us, maybe it felt like rejection, and she reacted by protecting herself, telling the family before the story got twisted against her. Dana kept trying to piece it together in a way that made sense to her, but every explanation only made me look worse, either as a predator or a clueless fool who couldn't set boundaries with his sister-in-law. I couldn't believe it. Dana was bending over backward to justify Jessica's actions while painting me as the villain. I reminded her that I had done nothing inappropriate. I'd never touched Jessica in any way that could be misunderstood. I told her Jessica knew exactly what she was doing when she lied, and that Dana was choosing to believe someone who had manipulated the situation from the beginning. That's when Dana said she needed space, that maybe I should stay somewhere else for a few days while she tried to sort through her feelings. I asked her point blank if she really believed I would cheat on her with her own sister. And Dana said, I don't know what to believe anymore. She admitted that Jessica's story seemed more believable to her. So I packed a bag and went to stay at my brother's house. I spent the next week calling Dana, trying to get through to her, trying to make her see the truth. But she barely spoke to me. She just kept saying she needed more time. Meanwhile, Jessica moved out of our house and into her parents' place. And Dana's whole family began treating me like I was some kind of predator who had preyed on a vulnerable woman. It felt like I was living in some twisted version of reality, where everything was upside down, and the truth didn't matter. No matter how many times I explained what really happened, no one wanted to hear it. Even my own friends started acting differently. Word had gotten around, and I could tell that people were whispering behind my back, wondering if the accusations were true. 2 weeks later, I finally convinced Dana to meet with me face to face. I was desperate to talk to her directly without distractions, hoping that if she just really listened, she'd understand. But as soon as I started explaining again, she cut me off. She told me she had spoken to Jessica multiple times since the dinner. Jessica had shared even more details. She said I complimented her appearance, asked invasive questions about her marriage and her sex life, and touched her shoulder and hand in ways that made her deeply uncomfortable. Jessica claimed I had said things like Dana didn't appreciate me, that I was attracted to her, that I thought about her in ways a brother-in-law never should. It was all lies, every single word of it, but Dana seemed to believe her. I tried to tell Dana again, Jessica was making all of this up. The only physical contact we ever had was when Jessica grabbed my hand that night in the kitchen. But Dana shook her head. She said Jessica had been having nightmares, panic attacks. She was seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma I supposedly caused. I asked Dana how she could possibly believe Jessica over me, especially knowing her sister's history of being dramatic and dishonest. I reminded her of all the times Jessica had lied to their parents growing up, about where she was, who she was with. But Dana got defensive. She said this was different, that Jessica wouldn't lie about something this serious, something that could destroy a marriage, unless it was true. She accused me of being unfair for bringing up things from when Jessica was a teenager, That's when I knew. Dana had made up her mind. No matter what I said, no matter how much I pleaded, she wasn't going to believe me. I got angry. I told her she was choosing a manipulative liar over her own husband, someone who had never once given her a reason to doubt his loyalty. Dana started crying. She said she wanted to believe me, but Jessica's story just made more sense than mine. That hit me harder than anything else. I realized then that it didn't matter what was true or not. Dana wasn't going to see it. So I told her I was done trying to convince her that she could choose her lying sister or her innocent husband. But I wasn't going to keep defending myself to someone who refused to believe in me. Dana told me she had already made her choice. She said she believed the best path forward was divorce, because the trust between us had been broken, and she didn't think our marriage could recover from this kind of betrayal. So that was it. I moved out for good the following week. A month later, Dana officially filed for divorce. Now I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment, trying to piece my life back together while Jessica gets to play the innocent victim, and Dana walks around feeling justified. As though she made the noble choice by standing up for her poor, helpless sister. The entire divorce process has been a nightmare. Dana's lawyer is trying to leverage Jessica's false accusations as proof of a pattern of inappropriate behavior, arguing that Dana should be awarded the majority of our shared assets as compensation for the emotional distress I supposedly caused. Everyone in Dana's world, her friends, her family, they all look at me like I'm some sort of predator. Most of the social circle we used to share has quietly vanished. People don't want to associate with someone who's been labeled as the man who harassed his own sister-in-law. I've even had to change where I shop, where I eat, where I go for coffee, because every time I ran into someone who had heard the rumors, I'd get that same disgusted, judgmental look. Like I wasn't even worth hearing out. What hurts the most is that I genuinely cared about Jessica. I wanted to be there for her during a difficult time. I never asked for recognition. I never expected anything in return. I just wanted to help her get through the pain of her divorce. And she repaid that kindness by setting fire to my life, by ripping apart my marriage and staining my reputation with lies. There isn't a day that goes by where I don't wonder how different things could have been if I had just told her, from the very beginning, to talk to Dana instead of me. If I had kept a firmer distance, if I hadn't tried to be understanding. But it never once occurred to me that someone could twist an act of compassion into something so malicious. I never thought a member of my own family, because that's what I considered her, family, could be so calculated and cruel. Now I'm 35 years old, trying to start over from scratch. Trying to figure out how to rebuild not just my life but my sense of trust. Because once someone you welcomed into your home lies about you with such conviction, and gets away with it, it changes how you see the world. How do you let someone in again, knowing how easily everything can be turned against you? I know I didn't do anything wrong. I know what really happened, and I know Jessica is a liar and a manipulator, but none of that seems to matter anymore. Because the people who mattered, Dana, her family, our friends, they all believed her story instead of mine. And I'm the one who has to carry the weight of her lies. I'm the one who has to live in the wreckage. I thought about trying to prove she was lying. About how maybe, somehow, I could find a way to expose the truth. But how do you prove a conversation didn't happen when it was just the two of you in a room? How do you prove that someone twisted your words and intentions after the fact? And even if, by some miracle, I could demonstrate that Jessica fabricated the entire story, what then? Would Dana come back? Would she admit she was wrong? I doubt it. Because that would mean acknowledging that she destroyed our marriage based on a lie. And sometimes, it's easier for people to hold on to the version of the story that hurts less. Even if it's the one that's furthest from the truth.